Culture change is one of the most difficult changes that you will ever face as a change leader. But what if you are just starting to lead a new team and there are some things about the culture that you would like to change? When we focus on subcultures instead of the overall culture, there start to be a lot more opportunities for change. And so what could be daunting can actually become quite doable. I'm Natalia Loback, and this is the Change Course podcast. I've spent my career leading complex change and transformation in organizations. And over my career, I've discovered what makes complex transformational change stick. Connected change is all about leading successful change within the context of the organization. And here at the Change Course podcast, we're all about making change sustainable. So listen in, drop us a like, a comment, and let us know how we can help you connect and change. A reminder that opinions expressed are entirely my own. Holistic culture change is one of the hardest changes to execute successfully. And there are a number of reasons for that. Culture is so hard to define, and we often talk about culture in terms of how things feel. And as humans, that emotional language, especially in the workplace, is often lacking. And when we focus on things like behaviors and patterns, it can get a bit more tangible, but you're often aiming for outcomes that are evoking a certain type of feeling. You want the organization to feel a certain way. And that is difficult because each person, of course, interprets their own emotional journey, their own emotional experiences completely differently. And in this world of engineering-based organizations and from this world of change that came from process reengineering, we struggle with things that are ephemeral. We struggle with things that are emotional. So when we talk about holistic culture change in an organization, it becomes overwhelming. But what if you are a new team leader? You're coming into the organization, or you're moving up into a role where you are going to be managing an important function, a group of people that are accountable to make that function happen. And as part of the operating model, it's a very key and important role. So how do you then, as a leader, change the subculture within your team? So before we get into the meat of this discussion, we need to ground in a really good definition of culture. I feel like there hasn't been one that's really grasped the zeitgeist. I don't think there's one that's commonly accepted, but I'm going to share one that I love. And this is based on all of those years that I did the culture change research and all of the definitions that I've grappled with over the years. This one, by far, is my favorite. And it comes from a book called The Insider's Guide to Culture Change by Siobhan McHale. And here's her definition. Culture is how things work around here, or how the place functions. It affects every aspect of your business, from how you develop solutions to how you sell your products or services to how you make your customers happy. It's all about patterns of thinking and relating that tell people how to behave in an organization. These patterns start to take hold the first day that people walk into the workplace. The reason why I love this definition is that it talks about how things work around here, how the place functions, and it really grounds in the patterns and the behaviors and how those all come together in a working system to make culture happen. So here is the part that if you are a new leader of a team, you need to know. If you want to change how things are done, you focus on the patterns or the behaviors. And if you want to change how things feel, you focus on the relationships. So I'll let that sink in. As a leader, culture is your responsibility. If you want to change the subculture, then you've got to focus on those two things. We do a really good job of defining the things that we don't want to see, the negative. We're very, very good at saying, I don't want I'll take an example. I don't want our salespeople to leave potential customers hanging for 2 days. Now, let's think about that behavior. We could make a value judgment on the salespeople. We could say, well, they're just not stepping up. Or we could dig deeper and say, why is this behavior happening? Why is this pattern occurring? It's not building trust with our customers, which is what we want, but it seems to be something that is culturally ingrained, culturally acceptable, and there are reasons why it's happening. And so if we get beyond things like systems or processes or all of that, what we might find as we start pulling apart the layers of the onion is that our salespeople feel like they need to bring every opportunity to their manager and clear it before they pursue the customer. So now we're looking at an established pattern and a relationship. So how do you go about changing that as a leader? First of all, you need to really understand why that pattern is happening. So don't take it at face value. Don't make a value judgment. You need to get all sides of the story. You need to understand what the perceived benefits are and the perceived detriments of changing this pattern or doing things differently. And then you need to identify what is the new pattern that you want to put in place instead. In order to make that new pattern happen, you've got to empower both your leadership, so the managers who are managing in that environment, those who are participants in the pattern, because a pattern takes at least two people, it's never just one, or two different roles. And you need to establish what the new behavior pattern is that is expected. And then you need to practice it and model it and keep trying it and listen to the negative feedback and identify if there are ways that it should be changed. But the key thing is to establish a new behavioral norm as quickly as possible and put that into place and reinforce it. And so you'll slowly start to see as people habit build, as people build those new neural pathways to do things differently, and they start to get rewarded. And I don't mean like, rah rewards, but as humans, we do build neural pathways based on rewards. And so a reward can be, it worked this time. This was easier than the previous way. I was received positively in the relationship where this pattern happens. So think about those three things. And it's very important that as you're identifying those behaviors and patterns, that you're unpacking those root causes, and that you're also thinking about when you're implementing the new, that you're building in those reward pathways. So some of it can be, this is easier for me. Some of it can be, this wasn't as painful as I anticipated. But it's also important, you have to think about the relationship as well. So, how does the person that I interact with as part of this pattern now respond to me in this new way? And it absolutely must be a positive response. And that is where the leadership piece really, really comes in. And so if we think about wanting to change how things feel, that is a very different question. And again, remembering that everybody's experience and perception is different and unique and individualized. Overall, what is the general feeling that you want to create? Trust, empowerment, collegiality. Be very clear with yourself as the leader what type of subculture you are wanting to build. And then really think through, as a leader in your role, what are the things in your own behavior patterns that build that positive side, all of those positive attributes that you want to see happen, and then also your patterns or tendencies that might create some of those negative repercussions that you don't want to see as well. And this is where, again, self-awareness as a change leader is incredibly important. This is also where you, as a lead, have a great opportunity to coach those that you're working with. So if you are leading a small team, so it's you that you're managing a group of direct reports, you don't need to think about that middle layer relationship so much because it's just between you and those that you're working with directly. But if you are in a position in a larger department or organization and you actually have several layers of management between you, yourself, and the individual contributors that are on your team, you do need to think about that middle layer of management and thinking about how you are incentivizing the behaviors that you want to see and de-incentivizing the behaviors that you don't want to see. And again, this can be around looking at how you respond to behaviors when they happen, how that response gets translated or transmuted out to others. And so, for example, if there's something that happens that you don't want to see happening, how do you address that in a way that builds relationships, redirects the behavior, and puts into place something that you want to see instead? So lots of different things that you need to be thinking about in this type of environment. But the most important thing that you can do as a change leader is think about how you want to measure success. And again, this is very difficult to do in a culture change. So in terms of how you are leading your team and starting to embed new behavior patterns, starting to change how things feel, my recommendation is take a pulse check at about 6 months after you've started. Reevaluate the behaviors and the cultural changes that you want to see happen against your vision for the culture and see where you're at. And do that every 6 months. Culture change takes a long time to become embedded. And so this is not the type of change that you can measure post-implementation at 6 weeks. It's not the type of change that you can say, a month in, we're going to be there. Absolutely not. This takes time, and it's very important to mark your milestones because it can get overwhelming. It can feel like you're not making progress for a long time. And then, like we've talked about in these complex adaptive systems made up of people and relationships and connections, all of a sudden there will be a watershed moment and all sorts of amazing interactions and incredible things start to happen all at once. And it feels like a chain reaction. It feels like something is happening very, very quickly. And that is true. but it's almost because it takes some time for the energy to build up in the system before it can be released and before it can happen in that way. So like I said, reasonable milestones every 6 months. Take a look at what you've accomplished or how you're doing against the vision, and ask those that you work with for feedback. How is this feeling? Are we getting there? What can we still work on? Culture is, as I said, one of the more difficult things to change. And what's really nice about it, though, is that this is the kind of change that you actually have to work on in increments. You can't really bring everyone into an all-hands meeting and say, we're going to change our culture and we're going to focus on this for the next 4 months. It doesn't really work like that. Culture is that long tail. So thinking about James Clear's Atomic Habits, I think about it in that way as well. It's the long tail. It's the cumulative effort over time. How things build until you get to that tipping point and things start to change. So you can't really stop all the rest of the work that you're doing because culture is in the work. Culture is in the interactions. So you've got to do it alongside what your core value stream, your core business, your operating model is asking you to do. It's embedded into the work, the daily work. And that's kind of what I find so exciting and fascinating about it. Again, this is something that is not easy. This is one of the hardest things to crack. It's one of the most difficult changes to implement. But I have been successful, and I've seen others be successful when we start small and we focus on just that subculture that we want to influence and change. And then as we get momentum, you can start to see the ripple effect, that positive effect on the system, moving outward and impacting others. And so from a leadership perspective, this is one of the things that you can start and do at any time. And the smaller and more specific you are, the more successful you'll be over the long run. Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, I invite you to like, share, rate, and subscribe because it helps others find us. Change Course is brought to you by Charthouse Advisory Services and ConnectedChange.com. Our music is Levity by Emily Clausen. Show notes have moved. We're now at ConnectedChange.com. So visit us there under the Change Course podcast page, and you'll find a list of all the resources that I've mentioned here today. While you're visiting us, sign up for the Change Navigator newsletter. You'll keep on top of all things change, and every month we are sharing exclusive content and resources only with our subscribers. So don't miss out. Sign up at ConnectedChange.com. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to change course.